We have yet another active day of severe storms, including more tornadoes and very large hail. We're going to walk you through the details over the next 24 hours, plus go over your Mother's Day forecast and give you an overall snapshot of the next 7 days. So let's take a look at the satellite picture this morning, and it has been a very active overnight. Tennessee and areas of Kentucky just got crushed with heavy rainfall and more tornadoes. Unfortunately, you can see all the lightning display with those significant storms, and they're looking at extreme flooding, folks. Areas of flash flood emergencies just north of the Nashville region. Some areas have picked up 8 to 12 inches of rainfall, folks. Very dangerous situation. And we also have new tornado watches in place, with that boundary slowly going to be sagging east-southeastward for the rest of the morning into the early evening time frame. Let's take a look at the overall hazard map. We can show you what we're talking about here. The area that's highlighted in yellow here, that is your tornado watch that goes on until extended to the 1 o'clock time frame. Or areas of northern Mississippi, back into Alabama, as well as into Georgia. That does include the Atlanta region. For that area in red, that is your flash flood warning, folks. Yes, that area has been picked up some serious flooding just north of the Nashville region. Yes, there's actually isolated pockets have already approached the 1 foot mark, with flood watches continuing to unfold. But that activity is going to continue diving east-southeastward, and we're going to be looking for new activity, likely going to be forming in Texas later on this afternoon, with the beginning stages of a significant hail threat that will likely unfold. So if we can take a look at the overall surface map, you can see the convective complex highlighted, this morning, over areas of Tennessee, back into Memphis here, swinging all the way down into Birmingham, up to Ohio. That is the most significant active weather. You can see where the cold front is, right? It's sagging up to your northwest, but it will be lifting further south and going to be stalling somewhere in this vicinity. There is going to be another disturbance that's going to be coming in from the southwest. That's going to create more lift, and you live north of that boundary, you're going to be in the large hail threat later on this afternoon. I think large-scale supercell thunderstorms start very early within areas of the Dallas-Fort Worth area, and we could be looking at some very heavy, large, hail within that region. So if you take a look at the water vapor imagery, you can see what we're talking about. The moisture levels start to surge coming in off the southwest here, and there's a convective complex that will likely blow up just west or just in and around the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex early this afternoon. And there is the complex of activity that's highlighted over the Tennessee Valley this morning will be diving that east-southeastward trajectory. So by later on this afternoon, around the 4 o'clock time frame, it's going to be highlighted across Georgia, back into the Carolinas, as well as in North Carolina, even getting into Virginia by then. But then all eyes kind of turn as this continues to move across the deep south in the overnight hours. So we're going to have that convective complex likely blow up across this region and then shifting eastbound in the overnight hours. So we're going to have renewed convection lifting through Louisiana, back into Mississippi, into Alabama, back into Georgia. Those could also pose a larger hail threat with more significant heavy rainfall as we get into the early evening time frame, into the overnight hours, and it likely won't even get until Georgia back until maybe 4 o'clock in the morning by then, with very heavy rain and some larger hail going to be associated with it, with that activity. So it's a very active time frame over the next 24 hours, and that's why the Storm Prediction Center doesn't have that enhanced risk for large hail. This is going to be a mainly large hail event. So we've got upscale growth likely forming, coming in off that southwest flow. And then we have that convective complex that's likely going to blow up across portions of the Dallas-Fort Worth area into central Texas. We could be looking at pretty significant big-time hail producer thunderstorms, and those will continue to push east as we get into the evening time frame towards the East Texas, likely enter Louisiana into the overnight hours, back into Arkansas, Louisiana, and eventually shift into Mississippi, Alabama, back into Georgia, as well as into the Carolinas, and eventually swinging up the East Coast with some heavier rains but these definitely are the origination point when you're having more of the daytime heating to work with, the more significant hail threat. And you can actually see what we're talking about. This is a snapshot of the latest, some of the high resolution guidance about 3 o'clock this afternoon. Those supercells definitely look very concerning just west of the Metroplex or just right around the DFW Metroplex. Those could be some larger hail producers. These are going to be back building further south, would likely include Waco and Austin. And these will be continue to move eastbound, likely entering Tyler, Lufkin, back into Shreveport as we hit into the evening time frame. And that activity will continue pushing east in the overnight across the southeast with that heavier rain and larger hail potential. And you can definitely see the updrafts of what we're talking about here. Here's the initiation of the activity this morning. You've got the activity that's highlighted over Tennessee, back into areas of Mississippi, Alabama, back into Georgia and the Carolinas. That is the first system that left all the tornadoes, unfortunately, yesterday, and the override of what's happening this morning. And this is the leftover of that system will continue to dive east southeastward. And then this is the new convection that happens today, this afternoon, likely firing up in and around west of the Dallas-Fort Worth region. So we could be looking at some pretty significant hail producing thunderstorms, supercells highlighted over potentially North Texas, back into Central Texas, and that feeds into East Texas in the evening and then shifts into Louisiana and back into Mississippi in the overnight hours, with also there's some of those larger hail producers in central and southern portions of Mississippi, Alabama, and eventually heading into the Florida Panhandle with their own renewed threat, but it likely won't reach them, with, at least with that complex, until early tomorrow morning. But overall, if you give a snapshot of the next 48 hours as far as like the overall precipitation goes, you can kind of see the dry slot across good parts of the Southwest and much of the Southwest here, but you have that convective complex highlighted across Texas, and then it moves across areas of the South with heavy rains coming across the Tennessee Valley through Kentucky, back into Mississippi and Georgia, and then really activating as we head towards the Florida Panhandle, and then lighter amounts further north as you swing through the Ohio Valley and areas of the Mid-Atlantic as well. But it's going to be an active time frame over the next 24 to 48 hours. But once we get past that, we are going to be seeing a little bit of cooler air for May standards, and that is going to finally kind of clear the atmosphere out as far as like at least severe storms, at least, because it's not going to be like that cold, but still you're going to definitely feel this cooler boundary of air that's going to be, kind of wiping out the atmosphere of all the ugly mugginess that you've been dealing with over the last week or so. But unfortunately, we are going to be looking at that cold front. It's likely going to be stalling right around the deep south, likely around the I-10, I-20 corridor. That is going to be another renewed concern, because that's going to aggregate some flooding concerns by the time we get into your Mother's Day. So here's the Mother's Day setup. We have another system, another upper level low that will be highlighted across Colorado into the Texas Panhandle. And then right to the south of there, that's where you have all the lift. And you got the little cool front that is going to be stalled across this region. That is going to turn an overrunning setup and produce some heavier rains across the central U.S. as we head into your Mother's Day coming up on Sunday. If we can take a look at the setup with that upper level low likely positioned across this region, this whole area is going to be activated across eastern Colorado, back into the Texas Panhandle, into West Texas, areas of the Deep South, into Central and North Texas, and along into Kansas, as well as into Nebraska. It definitely appears to be a wetter Mother's Day for you, but definitely getting concerned further south with those, deeper greens showing up on the map. That is that stalled cold front. And if we recall, that area has just been inundated with a lot of heavy rainfall as of late. Some areas have picked up 2 feet just in the last 10 days since April the 28th. So they definitely don't need any more rain, but unfortunately, they are going to be getting a lot more of it. Here's the overall precipitation for your Mother's Day, starting from your Sunday 7 a.m. to Monday 7 a.m. It's mainly going to be highlighted across the middle part of the country, where you're going to be seeing all the precipitation with that upper level low and that stalled frontal boundary further south. Pretty dry out west, so it's going to be a fairly nicer Mother's Day for you. And then really dry out into the southeast. It's just the middle part of the country across the plains and the southern plains and the deep south there with that stalled frontal boundary. Yes, you could be looking at some heavier rain prospects for those 24 hours through your Mother's Day time frame. But it doesn't end there, because it is going to be a slower moving system. And now the upper level low will be traversing across Oklahoma, producing their own rain showers for your Monday coming up on May 13th. And that will continue to push across North and East Texas. And then again, you have the boundary where that cool front will likely just kind of sit there. And that's going to cause that overrunning setup around this region for the deep south back into Mobile, the Florida Panhandle. So it continues to look wet, even going into your Monday timeframe of early next week. And that same system will be continued to traverse across the southeast, now highlighted back over these regions, unfortunately, of Tennessee, back into Kentucky. This is not going to be severe weather, but it will lay down a pretty good swath of rain highlighted across this region, especially in the central and eastern 2/3 of the U.S., with their own additional rain showers for them, while much of the central U.S. is on the backside of that system. That will be on your day on Wednesday. But what happens on Tuesday? What happens on Wednesday is that cool front just kind of sits there, right? I don't want to expect any like extreme temperatures, kind of like what we saw last, the last couple of days, with all the heat building up from the south and the colder air mass coming in. It's going to be more neutral. It's going to be overall, somewhat average. It's not going to be either extremes on either side of the coin. But we are going to be seeing yet another upper level low pressure center, this time highlighted probably further back off to the east. And that could set up shop across, yes, eastern portions of New Mexico. This is a dry slot, folks. They don't really miss it. They miss out on a lot of systems. But this one has a higher probability. It likely could build back further west, setting up some very welcomed rain by the time we head into Wednesday afternoon, as the dry line would likely retreat further back, and that would set the stage for additional lift for areas of New Mexico, eastern New Mexico, and through the Texas Panhandle. So this area is definitely in a drought-stricken region. So they'll take all the precipitation they can get, no question about it. So if we take a look at the overall setup as we head into your Thursday of next week, then you have the boundary. So that little, boundary zone kind of hangs out, and we're still going to be seeing this deep moisture coming in from the Gulf of Mexico. The dew points are pretty high. That cold front never really clears into the Gulf of Mexico, which is pretty normal for this time of year. They really don't have the oomph coming in from the north. They tend to stall further south. That's why these places have the wettest Mays, because these cold fronts just kind of sit there for days and days and days and cause these overrunning setups. And that's likely going to unfold as we head into your Thursday, as the rain prospects would likely really start to inundate for those areas across the southeast. I'm talking Alabama into Georgia, back into the Carolinas, but especially into the Florida Panhandle, into central Florida. You could be hit with some very heavy rainfall by then, with that kind of stalled frontal boundary just kind of hanging out. But overall, if you break down the next 7 days, again, we're not looking at any extreme on either side of the coin. We are going to be warming up after the cool shot of air for much of the week. We are going to be coming back with some warmer temperature anomalies across California, back in Nevada, back into Oregon, as well as into Washington and Idaho and Montana, through the Dakotas. It cools down a little bit as you swing further into the Rockies and Colorado, and there's areas and portions of the south and the southeast. But either way, it's not going to be overall very hot or very cold, but just kind of more or less neutral across a good part of the U.S. So more of a tranquil week. And after today, we aren't really expecting terribly too much severe weather for the next 5 to 7 days, but we are expecting a lot of heavy rainfall, complements of those disturbances, especially going to be moving across the south. So overall, with the warmer anomalies coming back for the Pacific Northwest and much of the West, you're still going to remain on the overall drier side than what you would typically see this time of year. But the subtropical jet is still alive and well. It's still kicking, and that's going to produce some, much needed rain showers across eastern areas of New Mexico. That will swing through Texas again, but you can see where most of the precipitation is, with the darker blues showing up with that stalled frontal boundary. That's going to produce the heavier rains, likely 3 to 4 times the amount that you would typically see this time of year. So you definitely stay on the wet side for a good part of the south and southeast through the Tennessee Valley, really over the next 5 to 7 days. So guys, I appreciate you guys watching. Do like this video. Definitely hit the subscribe button and catch me next update, where I protect you before and after the storm.